For anyone who is awake to what is happening in the world, it is a scary place to be. It's a scary place to turn on the TV and hear about the things that are happening. And for people who are sensitive, who are anxious empaths, who are prone to anxiety, this is a scary society and culture to live in. And so, what do we do? What do we do about this? And this comes up a lot in my practice because I work with a lot of sensitive people who feel like they are out of control in making a difference, and just it can really spiral into a scary place. So, what do we do to be able to be the change makers in the world? And so to make a change in the world, it's equal parts being and equal parts doing. So it is important to get your hands dirty, to speak up, to march, to protest, to build homes, to feed the hungry, to advocate for children, to do all of these things. So doing is very important, and we need to really cultivate a climate of social justice to make a change. On the other hand, it's just as important to be the change. So what does that mean? If we want to create peace in the world, how can we create peace in ourselves? How do we create peace in our homes, which will expand into our communities, into our cities, into our nation? It first begins with ourselves and creating an energy of peace within ourselves. So what does this look like? It's taking the time to recognize that our symptoms of anxiety and depression are speaking to us. So as I talk about a lot, these are messages that are coming up within our body. Does it mean that I need to reevaluate my relationships? Do I need to reevaluate my trauma history and go see a professional? Does it mean I need to eat better? Does it mean I need to give up drinking? Does it mean I need to make these little changes? How can I make my body a home that cultivates peace and safety? Because in this world, in this big world, we don't feel peace and safety. So how can we begin to create that within ourselves? As we do that, we can be able to create this environment for our home. So whether we live alone or with pets, we want our home to be a sanctuary. We want to begin to create this peaceful, loving space. We want to become the peace that we wish to see in the world for our children in the home, for our partners in the home, for our pets. What are we eating? Can we be more mindful about our meat consumption? Can we be mindful about how much plastic we're using in our home? How can we make sure to teach turning off lights and saving water? All of these little things to create a microcosm of the world that we want on a global scale. So when we feel out of control, we can spiral into intense anxiety symptoms. We can feel like we can't do anything to make a change, and it can really cultivate a lot of anxiety and shame. And so if we kind of scale back a little bit, we take a breath, we recognize that our feelings are valid, that this is a scary place to live in a lot of ways. But there are also ways that we can create that peace that we desire within ourselves. And this is where it all begins. This is how we begin to make the greater change. So I would encourage you to look at, how can I create a peaceful home within my body? How can I begin to tap into my anxiety and depression and learn what it's trying to tell me in order to create that peaceful space within me? Once we begin to do that, things begin to shift. We can then go into our home. And how am I as a parent? How am I as a partner? How am I as a conscious consumer of, when you choose to eat meat products, are you choosing ones that are humane? How could we cut back on our plastic wrap use? I have a dear friend who has really tried to take out plastic out of her home, and we were talking this weekend about how her example has really motivated me to begin to do that. And so how can we live by example for what we want to create with others? So how can we reduce the plastic wrap? How can we use more glass? How can we be more present with the people who are in our lives, our family, our friends? How can we put down our phone more to be more awake to the present moment, cutting back on social media, cutting back on things that numb us? As we do that, we'll be able to regain a little bit more sense of control over our footing here on the planet. And we can begin to see how we can do more when we are in a greater place of balance. And so the real peace begins cultivating inside and expanding that into your little worlds, which will expand to the greater world. So I hope that's helpful for those of you who are having a hard time with the news and all that's going on, and maybe suffering with some anxiety and stress and sleepless nights over what's going on culturally, and begin to create a greater sense of peace from within and be more awake and present to the moment.